Yeah, well, let's dig in. Hello, everybody. I'm David Cooks, and I tell you what, paralysis can take on many, many forms. It can be physical like mine. It can be psychological.
You can do anything you put your mind to. What seems impossible can be done by you.
And what we try to do is feature stories that go from difficult places to fulfilling purpose.
It may knock you down, but don't let it stop you. Got so much to give, a lot of life to live. You must go from paralysis to purpose.
You're in for a treat today.
Yeah.
My mission is to create therapeutic spaces for Black men, safe therapeutic spaces, for us to get comfortable with talking about the things that we need to talk about, the things we're conditioned to not talk about.
Paralysis to purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks. And as always, let me thank you for liking, sharing, and also leaving a review of this podcast. It helps us to reach more people with these great stories that inspire, inform, and instruct you on how to overcome obstacles, not just overcome, but to thrive. I say this every time that I do this. I am honored to speak with some of the most intriguing and inspiring people in the world. And today is no exception. I am so excited about the opportunity to talk with our guest today. He's here from Milwaukee. When I get to speak with some people from my hometown, it's special. He's an entrepreneur. He's a father. He has really found his niche, found his lane, found his purpose in helping Black men with mental health and other things. And we're going to talk about his journey and how he got to where he is now. And what you see today is not what you may have seen a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So we're going to walk with him on his journey. Harry Evans, welcome to Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you even reaching out and having me on your list as a good person to talk to. I really appreciate it. I'm honored.
I want to take our listeners on your journey of discovery and of evolution and how you have come to where you are and how you continue to evolve.
I am the founder of Heal Black Man. Heal Black Man is a grassroots organization that's centered around Black men's mental health. My mission and our mission is to create therapeutic spaces for Black men, safe therapeutic spaces, for us to get comfortable with talking about the things that we need to talk about, the things we're conditioned to not talk about. And in that same vein, introduce healthy coping mechanisms. So essentially, I really want to be able to change the narrative. Not want to, I am changing the narrative for the overall picture of the Black man in Milwaukee, and not to box myself in, because I totally believe that this is a worldwide movement, and I am definitely walking in that every day, one day at a time. I'll say that. I am a husband, a father of 3 children under 8. I have a 7-year-old son, a 5-year-old daughter. My son's name is Harrison. My first daughter, she is 5 years old, and her name is Jory. We call her JoJo. And I have little Gray. Gray Marie is 3 years old, and she is the sweetest thing I've ever met. And of course, I have to mention my wife, Amanda Evans, whom I've been married to for 10 years already, and I've been with her for 20 years. We have been dating since we were 14 years old. Now we are both 34 years old. To be at this point in my life, it is a lot of times I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. To be able to see myself, like you said, the evolution of a man, just the level of poise or intentionality that I have now about my everyday life, and being able to move with a sound mind, because there are a lot of things that can stand in the way to kind of shift how you feel, especially as a Black man. There's just so many things, this, as far as stats are concerned. Every time we leave our house, the chances of us making it back home are smaller than anybody else walking the earth. That's a little bit about me. I've been working in health and wellness for the last 12 years. I started off working in athletics and personal training, so working with athletes and your everyday young professional. I got into mental health just around COVID.
I don't remember if this is you or someone else. Did you help deliver one of your children or something like that?
Absolutely. You really did some research. My second child, Jojo, I delivered her on the side of the highway. She was halfway out. By the time I pulled over and opened the car door, and my wife told me, "You got to pull over," and because she's in my pants. So when I pulled her pants off, my baby was already crowning, like she was already coming out. And so I was really just there to receive her. And that story also was a very pivotal point in my life.
How was that situation one of the pivotal turning points of your life?
So I like to say, when you're on that journey, you're trying to find your identity, your purpose. There are sometimes, as far as mental health is concerned, also, there is an event that happens in your life, some sort of spiritual grounding that you tap into to give you some awareness, or you have to go and see a trained professional, a therapist, someone that's going to ask you thought-provoking questions to help you see things a little different than you may see them by yourself. My daughter being born was one of those moments. There was a lot of symbolic things that were completely divine from God. Our whole support system, my wife's parents, her sister, my sister, my parents, they were all out of town during this time because they figured that we have another week or two on the board. And so everybody was all over the country and they weren't here. However, my best friend, Derek Washington, he was coaching women's pro basketball in Australia at the time. And he is also my daughter's godfather. So during that time, with him knowing that the baby was coming, he came to visit. But he came a week early. He came during the time that everybody left. And also, my wife's best friend, which is our children's godmother, she came. She was on her way to Thailand and she turned around and flew back. She was the first one, I believe, to make it back in town as far as the support system, our community is concerned. And so they both stayed with us for a month, lending a helping hand, staying up late with us. We had a lot of deep conversations about life, about our childhood growing up that really gave me a new perspective. Derek did a wellness check on me. He spent every minute with me during the first 2 weeks. Work, whenever I was training, whatever I did afterwards, he was with me the whole time. And noticed that I wasn't showing up as myself, like something was wrong. We were driving down the street and he turned my music off and he just looked at me and was quiet. I'm looking like, you don't turn the tunes off. Like you gotta be serious. You just turn off the tune. So he's like, bro, are you okay? Like, you good? And I didn't know exactly what he meant or why he was asking that question. And then he went on to say, you just don't seem like yourself. I know who you are. I know what you want out of life. I know what your dreams and aspirations are, what your drive looks like. And it just doesn't seem like you're on the beaten path of what I know you to be. And to go a little deeper, he noticed that some of the things that I was doing was unhealthy, like after work, going to like happy hours and stuff. So I think we went out to a happy hour at least 4 or 5 evenings out of a 7-day week. And so I think that was one thing that caused him to ask the question, triggered him to ask the question, was I okay? And he's like, bro, you drinking 4, 5, 6 days out of the week. That's not okay. Like, it's not healthy. So I'm asking you, are you okay? Since that is one of my best friends ever, I really took to heart what he was saying. If he's saying something like that, then it must be some truth to that. I love to think that I'm definitely a self-aware person, but I'm not a perfect person, very perfectly imperfect. But I dug a little deeper with our conversation afterwards, and I was able to uncover that it was some truth to it. And in fact, I was showing all the symptoms and signs of depression. I was just functionally depressed. So nobody knew, nobody could tell that something was wrong. But when he came to visit, he could pick it out within 2 weeks' time.
If you would, because I think it's important for our listeners to understand how significant it is to have someone in your circle that really does know you and is willing to speak up. Do you find that that is uncommon for Black men?
Yes. When I talk about the awareness and actually digging a little bit deeper as to the conversation that was had and the questions that he asked me, that brought me to the realization that it was a clear blessing for God to remove everybody that normally supports us. Tim asking those questions, I found that it was a huge blessing to have someone do a wellness check on me that really truly knows me. I began to think more, and I realized that if I was going through what I was going through, and to have a friend to reach out and ask me, was I okay? There has to be tons of men out here who don't have that. They don't have that community. They don't have that circle or that person that's going to check on them and hold them accountable for being the best version of themselves that they can be. In fact, the average Black man is probably more likely to have someone who will literally watch them crash and burn and never say a thing. And then also sometimes make fun of you for wanting to do the right thing or being emotional and talking about how you feel. And so there's this double-edged sword that comes along with vulnerability with Black men. It's definitely a man thing, for one. Vulnerability is us not wanting to be outward about things. That is definitely a man thing, right? Doesn't matter what color or creed you are, but there's a different story to be told for a Black man. When you think about being a young boy and starting sports and all that, right away you're conditioned to toughen up, not show your emotions, not show that you're hurt, all of that stuff. And starting off that way is exactly what I feel pushes us into life with these skills that say you're not a man if you show your emotions, if you're crying, or if you say that you are hurting, or whatever the case may be. From that point, I knew that it was my job to create space for Black men to be vulnerable and talk about how we feel. And what started off as an idea just to make a support group on Facebook. And during this time, Brandon Marshall had just gotten started with I Am Athlete podcast. And it was getting into COVID. And so everybody had a story to tell. We were all feeling some kind of way. I think everybody can almost write a book about what their experience was. And so to see these athletes, these Black men with status, create a platform to have open dialogue and be vulnerable and talk about their feelings on their level. So as athletes, it's like, oh, are we going to get a chance to ever play again? And I'm watching it, I'm intrigued because these guys are showing up as themselves too. They're not code switching and they dress how they want to dress. I love that. I love authentic Blackness. I just do. And so that really intrigued me. And then to see these men spilling their emotions and being vulnerable, I was like, man, this is really cool. And then I began to think more and I'm like, this is cool and all, but what about the everyday Black man who doesn't have the money, the resources to create this nice set and bring other people to come and have a conversation about whatever comes to mind that you need to get off your chest? I seen that there was a divide there also. There's a division between the Black man with status and then your everyday Black man. For whatever reason, we can't seem to exist in the same room or sit at the same table. I went to sleep with all of that on my heart, and I woke up and God gifted me with Heal Black Man, the whole entire vision. And I, at that point, knew that it was my job to now not only create a space for Black men, but create a community. So I started reaching out to all the guys that I know. And I'm like, look, basically I had an epiphany. God spoke to me, dude. And we need to come together because our mental health is something that is not being highlighted or it's not being given enough attention. We're being overlooked. And I want to be able to come together and do something. So I brought like maybe 15 or 20 good guys together via Zoom. And we began to talk and they all looking at me. And this is the first time that I've ever been put in position to really, truly lead something like on a higher level. After the second meeting, they were like, why are you asking us what we're going to do? We are here because you called us here. We believe in what you told us. And it's your turn and time to lead us there, and we will follow you. And so from that point, I stopped having meetings because I had to really sit more with what it was that I was supposed to do. What is the real vision here? Basically, I procrastinated for about a year almost. And my wife and I, we have a creative space, like an Airbnb for creatives, like photographers who don't have studios and stuff like that. And she came here to check on the place, make sure nobody didn't tear up stuff. And she came home and she said, pull out your phone. So I pulled out my phone. She said, pull out the calendar. And I pulled out the calendar and she said, within the next 2 weeks, you need to find a date and circle it. And you are going to have your first Black men's gathering. You decide what it's going to be like. You decide all of that stuff, but you are going to do this. And it's going to happen right at our space. We already have the resources to do it. And at this point, you're dragging your feet. And so she's like, you can make a flyer right on Canva. You get it on there and you do it. You reach out to people. I wanted to do a panel discussion. She was like, reach out to those people, get their information, and then put the flyer out there. And so I circled the date. She would not let me like put it off. I was like, okay, well, I'll think about it and I'll let you know. She was like, no, pick a date right now. And so I picked the date and I posted the flyer. And the day of that event, this place was full of Black men, full to the door, standing room only. And it was an electric night. We had really good conversation. And everybody over time wanted to talk. It wasn't that way in the beginning. Some people were just in here and they, didn't really want to say anything. But what happens is when you start to see other people be vulnerable and talk about things, eventually you're going to be able to relate to someone. And then it spreads like wildfire where you're like, actually, I do have something to say. And now we got everybody like, hey, I got something to say. And I got something to say. And it was very organic. And so our conversation was centered around rejection and inadequacy. And being able to identify our experiences with rejection and inadequacy. And then kind of connecting the dots as to how those experiences made us who we are now when it comes to how we deal with adverse situations, or anything remotely close to those situations where you may have felt rejected or you may have felt inadequate and all those things. And so then it just spread. The conversation just went on and on. From that point on, I knew I had something.
The two people closest to you, your wife and your best friend, were the ones to really get you to move forward and to hold you accountable. I think that's really important. I want to go back a little bit to some of the signs of depression. You were successful. You have had a good job traveling the world, taking care of your family, doing the things that you're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And you were not happy with that. You end up quitting your job because you didn't want your son to see you unhappy. There was an image, if I can use that word, that you wanted your son to have of his father.
Absolutely.
And the one that you were presenting was not the one you wanted him to see.
So I was working this sales job. I was working for Time Warner Cable. I started working there at 23 years old. And I did that basically because I had got married. And I felt like that was what I needed to do to be a man, to be able to provide and take care of my wife. And she also worked the same job. She actually worked there before me. I was training at the Y, and I also was working valet. So in the same place. So at the Brown Deer Y, there's a clinic. And so I would take off my training stuff and work. I'll work 20 hours valet and I'll work 20 plus hours of training. Then she got this job working at Time Warner Cable and was coming home and telling me about her pay, telling me figures that it was unbelievable. I couldn't wait to see it. And so everything that she was saying was true. She was raking it in, man. The whole game changer here. There was a guy that I knew that actually worked at Time Warner Cable, and he was in leadership. I reached out to him on my own. I doubled back. Hey, man, how y'all feel about spouses working in the same place? And he was like, man, fill out the application. I got you. And so I filled it out. I got the job. But I knew that this job was not the job for me. We started traveling. Every 6 to 8 weeks, we were out of the country. That was something that kept me doing the job because I got the chance to travel. I got a chance to get the time off. Also, it wasn't a struggle to get time off and go and do what we wanted to do. And so I got a chance to be with her, have financial freedom, bills paid up for months at a time. And I'm thinking to myself, if this is this life that everybody talking about, if this is what it is all about, this is a walk in the park. I'm like, this is easy. So we traveling, working, and all that. So at 27, we tried for our first kid, and she became pregnant. And we also decided to take the next step to purchase a home. We purchased a home, and we closed a month before Harrison was born. So all of a sudden, all of these changes were happening really fast. Bought the house. I'm getting ready to be a father. And now I'm working this job that was cool because I was traveling. And now I won't be able to do that anymore, which means I won't be happy. I quit and went from making good money to no money. And my wife supported me doing that and also going on to my entrepreneurial journey of starting my own training business and doing what I love so that I'm happy every single day. My cup is full and I have something to give. And to move forward in leading in a good way, I became a stay-at-home dad. My wife went back to work at that place that I quit. And it was my job to take care of him, take care of this new house that I never owned a home before, and then also plan for a business. I never started a business before, never been a dad before, never been a homeowner, just really became a husband. You know what I'm saying? Right. And now I'm really about to feel it because I'm not producing. And that is, according to the patriarchy, that is the whole definition of a man. You are defined by what you produce. And so I'm having this ego trip right away because I'm doing all the things that you would think a woman would be doing at home, taking care of the kid. I'm throwing out breast milk. I gotta make sure I'm pulling from the back of the stash. I'm being a stay-at-home dad through and through. And so big ego trip on that because my wife's working and she's coming home every day, you know, and doing something that in my mind, I'm supposed to be doing. And then taking care of this newborn baby where, you know, how that goes. I was the one figuring out how to soothe them, how to keep on track with the sleep regimen and all that, the sleep schedule. And by the time I did all that and finally got him to take a nap, now I'm up against, do I actually relax or do I figure out what I'm supposed to be doing with this business thing? That's when another part of reality set in for me. And I was faced with a different tune of music. It was the fear of failing. I had all these creative ideas in my mind, and I had no idea how to move forward. Just take that step forward. They call it taking a leap of faith for a reason. I was afraid to take the leap. I quit my job without a second guessing it. But I overthought everything as it came to taking the next step to starting the business. Thinking about what other people thought about me. What if this doesn't work out? I was the type of person that if I couldn't make something happen the way I seen it in my head, I would overthink it so much that I would never do it. I wouldn't do it at all. My wife, she would come home and so what's the update on the business? And it would be kind of like crickets. And she'd be like, okay, no big deal. She never really said anything for a while. Every day I'm facing basically myself, standing in my own way. I would sit in the house when my son would be sleeping and I would sometimes scream in the pillow and cry. I was just afraid to move forward. And I'm saying it this way now, but at the time, I had no idea what was wrong. It took me into this dark space where I couldn't produce anything. It paralyzed me.
This is a good place to take a quick break because you did move forward. You talked about a couple of things. Your initial passion for wellness that you opted to not deal with because of some monetary gain.
Yep.
And then there was one other area in your life we're going to talk about when we come back. You had always wanted to be a sheriff. That experience was probably the one that catapulted you into your purpose. If I could say it this way, it was the final nail in the coffin for all the things that you weren't supposed to do. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about what happened as he pursued one of his other goals and dreams and became the person he is today.
We hope you're enjoying Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Paralysis to Purpose for more updates. Also, check out David's website at davidcookspeaks.com to learn more about his mission and purchase his book, Getting Undressed, From Paralysis to Purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, with our phenomenal guest, Harry Evans. And we're going to pick up where we left off. He had quit his job and was a stay-home dad and just began to understand that he had some things to work on. He talked about at his previous job, he would want to bring in some weights or anything to give him some physical activity because that's really what was inside of him. He was struggling trying to figure out how to turn that idea, that passion, into a business. Well, he had one other passion too, and that was to be a sheriff.
I wanted to be on the SWAT team. That was really what it was. As a young man, I wanted to kick down people's doors and and chase people and do all that type of stuff. That was young man stuff. I'm like, I get paid for that. I want to be able to do that.
You pursue becoming a sheriff, and you're working at a correctional facility. And that's when you began to see some of the injustices in the criminal justice system. That wasn't why you went to work there, but that's what you saw.
Yep.
And that also is where you begin to see disparity in terms of wellness and therapy and those types of things for Black men. Go ahead and talk a little bit about what that experience was and how that really solidified the Heal Black Men part of what you do now.
I got the opportunity to apply for the sheriff's department. I jumped at that. They started me as a correctional officer and put me in the county jail, Milwaukee County Jail. And I thought it was going to be a good path. I was like, man, this is a good opportunity for me to, try something different. It also was scratching my itch of not creating, but providing. Like I was feeling inadequate because I was at home. And so this opportunity started moving forward. And I was like, I jumped on it because I didn't want to feel like I wasn't producing anymore. I'm working in the county jail, thought it was going to be a good thing because it's a government agency. It was a good experience, but the perspective, it's to a different perspective, right?
It was a good experience, but it was a bad experience that was a good experience.
Absolutely. It was all of those things. As a correctional officer, the way it's set up in there, or was at the time, was it was one officer to 60 inmates in a housing unit. Depending on what unit you're in there with some people that did some maybe petty crime, or you might be in a unit with the killers and the dealers, and it's just you. You don't have a firearm. You got a taser, some mace, and a radio to call for help if something happened. And I never felt like I would need that, just because of how secure I am as a person and how I communicate. I'm definitely an extroverted person. Conversation is not a very hard thing for me. The way it was all structured, my back's to the wall, and in front of me was the housing unit. And there was an upstairs. And so I sit and I get to see everything that's going on. I had to do rounds and checks and stuff like that. So at any point, I was in incredible danger. I could do a round and somebody could whack me in the head. Right. But that was never the case. I made good relationships and I had good conversations with these men. And I began to see that it was maybe 80% young Black men and 10% older Black men and 10% white men. And then they were separated. There were some white guys in like the general population, but for the most part, what I would see is that the white guys were the addicts. And so the addicts were treated different. They wore a different color. They wore blue. They did not wear orange. They got a chance to work minute for minute off of their sentence. So you would see them walking around, mopping, cleaning, working in the kitchen, no cuffs, nothing. They just have somebody watching them, but way different when you see the general population. These guys are in orange. They're shackled on their ankles. They're shackled on their hands. I also learned that a lot of the guys that were wearing blue, they were just awaiting a bed to be open in a rehab facility, and then they would transition there. They got double mattresses. They got double food. They were allowed to watch movies. Their family would bring in DVDs for them to watch. And it was polar opposite. Then I see the young Black man that is more than likely the one who dealt the drugs. This is when I got to understand that the system was designed for Black men to fail. And when I say that, I would talk to these young men who knew nothing about this legal jargon and what was going on with their own case. They would have public defenders, and they couldn't even figure out if the public defender was on their side or not. And what would happen was they would scare them to death and basically rope them into taking a plea deal that required them to do a pretty large stint in prison. And when I say pretty large, at least 4 to 7 years. And then they would tell them, if you don't take this plea and you go to trial, then we're going to hit you with 14 years. We're going to hit you with double. And so these kids would take that and just say, sign me up. And I would watch these young Black men become okay with going to prison for 4 to 7+ years. And they automatically would shift the perspective right away and say, hey, 7 years, these guys were 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. So they're doing the math and they're like, man, 7 years, I won't even be 30. I get out, I'll be good. I'm good. I'm credible in the street still. When I get out, I still got my whole life ahead of me. I'm cool with that. I would hear these guys be excited to go to prison because the county jail was considered a worse environment than a prison setting. If we take it all the way to the school system, how these kids are already conditioned to those institutionalized environments. Most NPS schools, they resemble prisons. You walk in, it's security. It's very small windows or none. You got somebody telling you where to go, when to be there, what you're doing, what you're not doing. And then they're being underserved as far as resources to even be better. So automatically, our kids in the inner city, our youth in general, they are being groomed for the system. When they get in the county jail and they see some of their guys, their friends, and stuff like that, this is just a part of what their life is. It was to be expected. You can't say that you did a bit in prison or you did some real time, then you're not respected in the streets. You looked at it soft. And that was one of the wildest awakenings I ever had. I went to a suburban school. I went to Brown Deer Middle School and high school. And so I was slightly green in a sense, and I had no idea that I was. And it also gave me an experience. I felt like I was in prison or in jail with them because we spent so much time together. They work you like crazy. You work 12-hour shifts and they'll force you into overtime. And so imagine being at work for a normal shift and it's 45 minutes left and you watching the clock. I'm about to go pick my son up, thinking about what the rest of your day will look like. My phone rings at the housing unit and they tell me, Evans, we need you to stay after a little bit. And I'm like, okay, how long? A couple hours or whatever? No, we need you to stay a whole another 8 hours. So I had to set up my life where I had a person on call at all times, just in case I got forced to stay and I can't pick my son up. So now I had to call or make a phone call like I was in jail. I had to call like the master control. I said, hey, I need to make a phone call to my wife. And they would have to dial the number and then patch me in and all of that. And I had to say, I'm in here for another 8 hours. So can you call, whoever needs to be called because I can't pick Harrison up. That type of stuff was wild. Then here's the third thing. The picture that I saw in regards to mental health in Black men. So there's already majority Black men in here. And now when I take my first trip to the mental health unit, I see the wildest thing. Now when I think about it and I talk about it, that was traumatic. I had traumatizing experiences every single day.
Here you are trying to find yourself
Yeah.
in this and trying to see if this is what you're going to attach yourself to. And I was going to use the word stress, but trauma is a better word for what you face continually. Before you get into a few of the details about the trauma, how did you manage?
I had no awareness of my mental health and not show my emotions, or in my mind, I was thinking like, no big deal. I'm watching all these other people seem to just shrug it off. I'll come home and maybe tell the stories, but I never really realized like how heavy. When we did get a break, there was no good food to eat. It was terrible. It was terrible. It was dirty. It was dark. It was no condition. To me, they should have had, when we walk through those doors to actually go in the place where we take our breaks and all that, we should
Right.
be able to get quality food so that we can actually go back and deal with what's going on the other side of those doors, hearing that buzz and waiting and looking into the camera. And oh man, it was a crazy experience.
What would probably be the worst thing you saw?
For one, when you go in there, it smell like you just got to the zoo. Like when you go in to see the elephants, it smelled like feces. And you go in there, everybody is naked. They don't have clothes. They have a vest on, a suicide vest, because they consider suicide risk, and so they couldn't have regular clothing garments on. So they had this vest on that just pretty much covered them enough so they're not nude. And I seen a guy using his feces, and he had all over his face, painted a warrior, and then he drew a whole picture with people and the sun and clouds, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this guy was in jail. He clearly did not belong there. He needed help. So then that gave me a new awareness where it's like, okay, this is the most extreme, but then outside the mental health unit, you also see Black men that clearly they belong in a mental health facility and they need real treatment, and they don't really belong in jail. Not to say they didn't deserve that, but their condition was very clear. I had no training. I didn't understand any of that. But I could tell you just from seeing that guy don't belong here.
You weren't excusing the
No,
reason, the quote unquote reason that they were there. You were just saying it's clear that there's an issue that needs to be addressed before you address the other issue.
absolutely. And
And
it's probably something that should be looked at, because when you think about why or whatever this person did to be here anyway, you have to consider what condition this guy is in mentally.
in society today, and I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, mental health has become the defense for many people for many things. Just like
Yeah.
earlier, it was, I feared my life. That was a defense.
Yeah.
And mental health has come a defense. Let's fast forward. Obviously, you left there.
And I left with a wealth of new knowledge and an understanding of how society works and the systems.
Most people don't get that inside experience. And so the perspective that we get is what we see or hear, and it's incomplete. It's probably the best way to describe that information.
Yeah.
The journey that you have gone through or are going through at this time, from being a successful business person that's unhappy, becomes a father who wants to serve and take care of his family, and becomes disillusioned and paralyzed in thought and can't move forward. You're dealing with depression. And then you go into a correctional facility while you're dealing with your depression. When did it finally turn for you?
It finally turned when I had that event and I saw how many men showed up to be able to just talk. I would be willing to bet that they didn't really truly understand that us gathering was really about our mental health. I was glad that they came. That's when I realized that my divine purpose here on earth is to be able to create spaces for Black men to be able to do that, allow them the opportunity to be educated on mental health, so that the awareness is created so that they can have that light bulb moment that I had when Derek did a wellness check on me. I wanted to create that opportunity for everybody. And so that's what I set my mission to be. And after that one event, I said, okay, I'm going to have a yoga class for Black men.
Let's talk about that. For those who are not raised in the Black community, aren't familiar with some of the traditions, I guess might be the best word. First of all, you come from a family of faith, a faith-based family, a Christian family.
Yeah.
And the means of addressing issues outside of going to church can be frowned upon by
Absolutely.
some. Okay.
Yeah.
Not by all, but by some.
Yeah.
And yoga,
Definitely
of all the things, you do not do that.
You do not do that. Nope.
Because that's just the devil, right?
It's the devil and all that.
How did you reconcile what you are actually presenting to the men as a coping mechanism versus what people were accusing you of doing, if that makes sense?
Vulnerability definitely became like my superpower. And so I led by just explaining a little bit about my story and what my mission was. And then I definitely talked about stigma and how the idea of yoga may be frowned upon, but we're not here to worship anything. We are here to become grounded with ourselves and to be challenged physically with ourselves. This is not a competition. You don't have to worry about the person next to you. All you want to focus on is your body being present in that space and pushing yourself. I just set the tone that way. I don't have to work very hard to get guys buy-in. That is a part of the gift that was given to me. I don't take credit for that. That's all God. And so I just try to remain obedient with what I hear and what I receive. I'm only a vessel, a vehicle. I'm here to create these spaces. And so we went on ahead and did the yoga class, had a Black yoga instructor. It was only like 6 of us. I recorded a few clips. This is when Reels on Instagram had just started to become a thing. Afterwards, I looked at the clips and I was like, they look a little crappy. I don't really like it. But whatever, I'm going to try to put together a reel. This was my first time. I used the little clips. I'm like, this isn't exactly what I wanted to capture or what I wanted it to look like, but whatever. I put it out there. It goes viral. Boom. It reached 1 million views. And once I started to look at the stats behind the engagement, it was a lot of Black women who were taking liking to this. That completely blew me away. I wasn't expecting that. But then I thought about it a little bit more and I understood that this is still true today. We truly need our women. We do. If my story isn't evident enough in that, I mean, she played a part in holding me accountable to even create this space. But also, they're the ones sometimes that actually push you to get other things together, like your health, all of that type of stuff. So I realized that most Black women really want to see us in that environment. They want to see us getting better. They want us to be able to show up and be present and be good leaders. And I mean, I definitely realized that if I didn't know it before, now I knew that I had a thing. This was a thing, the thing. And so I started having yoga classes and it just began to grow. I think I probably got in one session 50 men, 50 Black men to practice yoga. And so I structured the class a little bit different than any other yoga class that you probably think of. We had 30 minutes of dialogue first. Me and the yoga instructor, we would pre-plan topics. First, we would present these topics as affirmation and then tell what was connected to that affirmation or the story behind it. And then we created agree space, a strongly agree, a disagree, and a strongly disagree. And after we would talk about this affirmation or talk about this story, we would allow the men to not even have to verbally say anything. Just choose a side. How do you feel about this? And so they would all participate, choose a side. And then from there, we would, now who wants to talk about why they're standing where they're standing? And that is how we got people to get comfortable with being vulnerable. And after we talked about those things, we practiced yoga and sent everybody on their way, definitely feeling a lot better than when they came. And we did this every single week for a year straight.
Not only are you changing the narrative and breaking down systems within the community, you worked in a system outside the community called the correctional facility. There are systems that we've developed within the community that you begin to break down because, like you said, yoga and some of these other methods of coping were taboo. There was a stigma related to all of this, and you've been able to break that down. And the key thing you said, Not only were you changing the narrative, you were impacting lives. They left better than when they came. And ultimately, that's what purpose is about. Just about impacting other people's lives for the better.
So to couple with that, I continued to have those conversations, like those panel discussions, the very first event. I continued to have those. And it turned into a movement. And I'm continuing to create content, showing what we're doing. This stuff is growing. The Heal Black Man platform on Instagram is, I think, up to 14,000 followers now. So it was wild. But from there, I realized that it was serving others that was the key for me. And it opened up so many doors, me doing that and documenting and showing it. And a door opened for me that I never thought would happen. And that was getting into research, neuroscience, and Black men's brain health. One of the real clips was viral, and a organization called the Good Life Path that was started by UC Davis out in the Bay Area reached out to me on Instagram. They were providing mind, body, and spirit classes, resources to Black and brown elderly people. She explained to me, like, hey, I'm having a really hard time getting men to show up to anything. We talked more, and I ended up forming a partnership with UC Davis and the Good Life Path to develop their men's mental health group. And I co-facilitated that group. All we were doing is virtual. We called it Barbershop Talk. Barbershop Talk still exists. I'm no longer doing that, but it's still going. And there's still men from all over the country who log in to Barbershop Talk every week and have a safe space to talk about the things that they need to talk about. And now I have a partnership with the University of Kansas Alzheimer's Center, where I was able to use my wellness side of things, my personal trainer side of things. And I'm on a research team as a community partner where we do diet intervention studies for healthy aging to prevent like Alzheimer's and dementia and stuff like that. And I help them create goals that promote wellness, as far as exercise is concerned and all of that. And here I am now serving a whole different lane of people when I thought my purpose was to just serve Black men in mental health.
You just did what was in front of you. And you started with that. You didn't have all of the plan. And at one point, you wouldn't do anything because you didn't have all of the plan. But now you have done what you knew to do, and the rest of the plan began to unfold for you.
And it's still doing that.
Which took you from paralysis to purpose.
Absolutely. So many doors still continuing to open. I now serve the youth also through the National Alliance of Mental Illness. I run a program called Ending the Silence. It is a stigma reducing program that teaches the youth about mental health and how to advocate for themselves, how to advocate for someone else, empowering them to use the resources, to pivot through stigma and identify what it looks like, because it can live in your own home.
Before we finish up, I ask each of our guests what comes to mind when they hear each of these words, and that is perspective, perseverance, and partnerships. Throughout our conversation today, there are elements of each of these components. When you hear the word perspective, what comes to mind for you?
That light bulb moment that I had when my friend did the wellness check on me, that moment created awareness that shifted my perspective on everything. And if it wasn't for him asking me those words, bro, you good? I wouldn't be here doing this right now.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, man. Because I'm walking in purpose and because I know that it's divine and my goal is just to remain obedient, these doors open. And now it's no longer about me finding opportunity. It's about me managing these opportunities. I literally feel like every single day, I am one good day away from my whole entire life changing. Simply because I'm serving and I'm walking in a place where it's completely clear for me. I know that this is where I'm supposed to be. And I find myself taking on so many things. And I think I'm falling in love with being uncomfortable. The sky's the limit, man.
Partnerships.
Without partnerships, I wouldn't be where I am. I mean, we need community. The significance in that is that everybody has a gift. I can't be good at everything. I realize that sometimes you have to collaborate. And when you collaborate, you put your minds together, everything is better than one.
Do you consider yourself an expert?
I do not consider myself an expert. I consider myself an advocate and a perfectly imperfect person. I don't show up as a person who knows everything, but just a person with high awareness that's going through the same journey and struggles that everybody else is. I'm just trying to make it cool to take care of yourself in the process.
Do you ever fully recover from depression or mental challenge? Or do you think that's something that's ongoing and gets better with time, but something that you always battle?
I like to paint pictures, and so I'm going to do that. I was once under this dark cloud in this dark space. I have found awareness. I do things to make sure that I'm putting myself first and my mental well being. That cloud that was once over the top of me is always following me. And I have an awareness on the cloud. And when things happen that make that cloud come closer to me, I can feel it. And I will do anything to never allow it to be over the top of me again. And that means choosing myself first. I
Mhm.
also am intentional about letting my wife know when that cloud is close to me. I shoot her a text and I'll say it's one of those days, and she already knows. And her response is, "So what do you need from me? What needs to happen?" And I do whatever I feel like is necessary. I am not depressed right now or anything like that. I don't think I'm suffering from it, but it's always around somewhere.
You wanted to trigger me with a couple of
It was just one. You probably just don't remember it.
I probably don't
When you
remember.
were
You said it
coaching
was one. You
Marquette.
said it was at least one.
So this is a full circle moment because when you were coaching at Marquette High School,
Mhm.
I played for Brown Deer High School, and we played in summer league. We played against you guys, and afterwards we talked and we had a good conversation. And you were like, "Man," in so many words, you asked me like, "Do you really want to attend Brown Deer High School?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I responded to you yesterday. I did want to remain at Brown Deer, but it was only because I had just switched schools in middle school and I got new friends and stuff like that." But then fast forward when I graduated high school, the way my high school career went, it bothered me for a long time. So much so that a couple of years ago, I had to let go of the bad feelings or the resentment that I had towards coach. I would see him in the grocery store and he'd be smile at me and act like we was best friends. I thought about you so much. My senior year, I should have just figured out what it would take me to go on over to my
Well,
But you probably don't even remember that encounter.
yeah,
You don't remember that.
I don't remember that, but I think there was during that time, one of my classmates was a teacher over at Brown Deer. And he may
Mhm.
have mentioned something about some really good kids and they would benefit from a Marquette High education. I'm like, well, okay, well, I can only ask them about it and they can come or not come. To your point about letting things go, I was unceremoniously let go as a coach at Marquette High School. And it took me a while to really let it go. I wrote about it in my first book and how in the moment I had to live in a place of gratitude to not be in a place of anger. And it was just this season, I believe, or maybe it was last season. I went to a game at the high school because they have a really good team and there were some kids I needed to support their family and stuff. And I talked to the athletic director who was the messenger that told me I was no longer going to be coaching there. And
Mhm.
I said to him, I said, I want to thank you for that.
Mhm.
And he's like, what? I said, thank you for firing me. I said, I don't think I could do this right now anyway. I said, I would have stayed too long and missed out on some other things I was supposed to do. It wasn't pleasant, but I just want you to know we're good. And I understand what you're saying about when you have to let that thing go.
I had to let it go because every time I seen him as a grown adult, it was something in the pit of my stomach that I was upset at that man because I feel like he ruined my future.
Right.
You know
and
what I'm saying?
Right. And you're doing really well.
And I'm doing well. Yeah. I'm doing well. And I still felt like, man, you robbed me of my future. And we had a great year that our class was just good. I mean, that was the first year they let juniors play junior varsity because we had 12 seniors on the varsity basketball team. So
which is unheard of.
Exactly.
You don't do that because it just handicaps your program, for lack of a better word. So so when you were saying that, I was like, wow. And I put something out on Twitter the other day that when you begin to see your players called legends and being inducted into the Hall of Fame, even at this for a minute, and it's just an honor that there are people who, like you, I had a small impact in their lives in a way that I often don't remember doing. And you probably won't, when you look down the road, you have no idea how many people you have impacted because you won't meet the majority of them. But one or two will let you know, and it's worth it. It's worth every minute of it. So, well, this has been great. That was an easy one. I thought you were going to tell me that I crossed you up or something, and then you tried.
No. It was just that we had an encounter. We had a nice, conversation, and it wasn't like, pushy or anything like that.
No.
I just wanted to, remind you that we had an encounter when I was a young man, and then also, we attended the same church.
Yeah.
Now I see you all the time.
Yeah. Now, it is interesting because I didn't put together all of the connections over that time. I mean, I talked to your father-in-law all the time about basketball. We would talk, and he wasn't your father-in-law at the time. And we talked basketball all the time. And I,
never put it together, right?
I'm not that guy that is doing that.
Right. You ain't like, you're trying to steal players and all that kind of crazy stuff.
And who is that? And who is that? And
nah, you just posed the question like, how you like it over there?
How you like it? Everything good? Because if not, I knew you were a great student too. So that was part of the conversation. So, well, anyway, hey, thank you so much for your time. This has been a marvelous conversation. I look forward to getting this out there. And man, I need your Instagram touch. I need to find something. I need to put out something that's not very good.
Man, you gotta stay consistent with it. But I don't think I gave you my Instagram handle.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do all that right now. So if people are interested in following you or getting a hold of you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
It is definitely Instagram. Instagram is Heal Black Man @ Heal Black Man. Singular N. Yep, all together, Heal Black Man. And then I do have an email. You can always email me, hevans@healblackman.com.
And he'll get back to you. I mean, I chased him down.
A little bit, you did, and I appreciate you because it wasn't intentional. You know how stuff, I was talking about, it's about managing these opportunities now. And so you sent me a simple message too. It just said podcast.
Yeah, and just say, okay.
Got you, coach.
and so it's not uncommon. I talked to a number of your peers and from a generational standpoint across the country, and you all's schedules are amazing to me. And so I'm always like, hey, let me know when it works. Let me know when you can do it. And so I'm just glad we were able to get it done. So again, thank you so much for sharing your story. Until next time on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, I'm David Cooks, reminding you that your ability to endure is always greater than your willingness to endure.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thanks for tuning in to Paralysis to Purpose. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paralysis to Purpose on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To purchase his book, visit davidcookspeaks.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with David Cooks.
In human design, I have what's called emotional authority. We experience life through our feelings. It's not a bad thing. It just means when we're in that happy state, that high state, enjoy it. Do what lights you up. Don't make decisions from that place, but enjoy it. And when you have these lows, know that it's okay to have times of reflection and it not be a situation where you think you're spiraling into depression somehow.
Next time on Paralysis to Purpose.
It just gives you the permission to step fully into the power of who you are as a sovereign being here, having a human experience.
Paralysis to purpose.